But that's a really
Yeah.
beautiful pivot point to something I was going to bring up, and you brought it up just then so eloquently with martial arts. But where is the realm moving now, plant medicines, into this new world? Because I can see a lot of things being trialed and errored and explored, and the word appropriation kind of keeps coming up and getting thrown around. Um, didn't really expect wokeism to be found within plant medicine circles, but it is apparently. And I'm someone who really wants to be respectful as much as possible, of course, and walk with reverence and with honor and integrity. But I also want to see what doors haven't been opened, and to share in those, in the novelty and the co-creation of what we're putting together. And you hinted towards the prophecy of this kind of like the new way coming, when all of these like plants are coming together from different parts of the world. And I think the Hopis call it the rainbow tribe, and I forgot the word you used to describe, but the new world kind of people that are awake at this time to help heal. Where do you feel like the line is drawn in terms of cultural appropriation, being disrespectful, but also safely navigating new terrains in the way that we operate and serve and participate with plant medicines?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think like with a lot of these things, it's often really helpful. Sorry, I think someone, let me just put my phone, I'm using my phone as a um, thing. Well, maybe just, yeah, I think it's okay. Someone was calling me. Um, I think sometimes it's really beneficial to look at other things to better understand something that we may not be able to see as clearly. So, for example, we were talking about martial arts. You could use that same argument that by me practicing jujitsu, I'm culturally appropriating a Japanese martial art. Um, you could look at wine. I mean, that's just I don't know why that came to me, but um,
But
in
practically anything,
France,
really.
yeah, I mean anything. But you know, in France, they had a blight that wiped out most of their vines. Some of those vines before that blight happened went to California. So then they had to say, okay, well, all of our vines are dead. What are we going to do? Well, they went to California and got their old vines back. But those vines weren't purely French vines anymore. They were French vines that had been growing years now in California soil. So when they took those back, they were now French vines, but they had California literally in their roots, in their
Mm.
constituency. Um, and I think a more, you know, again, I don't necessarily like this word, but in this realm of spirit, there's a singularity. And our mareación, our dizziness, our fear arises when we begin to look at things as separate. Um, and as you said, one of your experiences with mushroom, it allowed you to see that everything is connected. And it's humanity's fear. It's our fear when we see the other as somehow different. Um, a guy who I interviewed, his name is Jeronimo. He fascinating guy. He works for, I mentioned MAPS. That's the U.S. organization that's working with like psychedelic studies. There's also its European counterpart, which is called ICEERS, and I think it's the International Center of Ethnobotanical
Mm.
Research and Science, something like that. But he said it really well. He said something that I had seen that I just I never put in such, I think, a concise or relevant way. And he said, when the Europeans arrived in the Americas, I think he was, kind of talking about the Amazon because that's where his research was. But he said when the Europeans arrived in the Americas, they looked at the indigenous people as being too indigenous and they needed to be more European. They were savages and they needed to be more European. Nowadays, it's the same racism, but it's the opposite. Europeans look at the indigenous people and they say, oh my God, they've become too European. They need to be more indigenous.
Classic.
That's that woke mentality. That's
Mm,
that cultural appropriation mentality. It's actually coming from a place of separation, of not seeing things from a bigger picture. And it's the same thing that they think they're fighting against. But they're so lost in the variación, they're so lost in the dizziness that they can't see it. And in 50 years, though, that same mentality will be doing the opposite thing. They'll become
yeah.
the enslavers again.
Yeah.
Um, so, like all of these things, there's a validity in what people are saying, but it's how do you approach that? And I think ultimately, in its most simple terms, is respect.
Mm,
That's where my teacher, for example, is he's a Peruvian guy. No Peruvians wanted to study with him. Why? Because Peruvians view him as a witch, as a
mm.
demon.
Yeah, that's right. That's quite strong in the culture, isn't it? Like, even in Iquitos, people would be referring to the shamans as evil and bad people. And yeah,
Yeah.
so interesting.
So if it wasn't for foreigners coming to learn with him, that tradition would be dead.
Wow.
So is that cultural appropriation, or is that learning how to pass on that knowledge for the sake of the benefit of
Mm.
humanity?
What are your thoughts
The
then
answer
on
is quite
people?
clear.
Yeah.
Now, again, this is where this idea also that I mentioned of Amika is really important. Is if you take that and you forget the story, you forget where it comes from, then that idea of cultural appropriation then begins to have truth
Mm.
because you're taking something, you're extracting it without honoring it, without respecting it, whether that's through monetizing it or making it your own. I mean, that's something I really see now in this world of not only psychedelics, but everything is we take something and we make it like our own version. We label it.
Yeah.
This is Jason's ayahuasca method.
Yeah. Funny because
you
it's
know,
kind of like what Monsanto are doing, and everyone's so upset about Monsanto taking nature and patenting it. But in a
yeah,
way, as an individual, taking our corporation, the straw man, and then trying to attach a natural process or pathway into it for recognition or monetization. It's almost the
yeah,
same thing in a way.
absolutely. So, like all of these things, there's truth to them, and like all of these things, when something is taken to the extreme, it becomes the very thing that it's fighting against.
Mm,
So, ultimately, like all of these things, there's no easy answer, and that there's always going to be nuance. There's always going to be complexity. Um, but at its root, it's like, where is our heart coming from? And if our heart is coming from a good place, then it's good. There actually is a really simple way of looking at it. The Shipibo, who I've done a lot of work with, they have this really beautiful thing, and it's like every time I hear it, it just touches even on a new way. Their word for good is hakun, and on a deeper level, it means truth. So that which is good is that which is true. And on a deeper level, it means that which is life giving,
mm-hmm,
that which contains the creative force is truth. Therefore, it's good. That which is hakun ma, which means not good, is that which is not true. It's that which is not life giving. It's
mm-hmm,
that which is dividing, separating. It's perpetuating the mareación, the dizziness. And I think if we look at things through that lens, things become much more clear. What I'm doing, is it life-giving? Is it is it perpetuating that creative force? There's a reason, even for example, in Christianity, that the beginning is creation. And who created creation? The creator. That creative energy is truth. It's good.
Mm,
And that which we do, which is in alignment with, which is dancing with, which is flowing with that creative energy, is ultimately good because it's truth.
mm,
And that which is opposing that is ultimately furthering the dizziness. It's continuing the separation. And I think, again, we always have to do a bit of a dance, but I think that's a really good principle to hold on to.
oh,
And
it's like
you
the
know,
most important perhaps for these times. I think that's what everyone's looking for without entirely realizing it, how to get on that dance floor, you know?
yeah. Yeah, and
How do you
so
feel like you can
so for
describe it?
like the question you asked about the cultural appropriation, is this serving that creative force,
Mm,
or is it doing something that's dividing that? Um, it's like that was one of the things that really I found fascinating, even during the pandemic, was people who considered themselves plant doctors. Uh, Many people wouldn't be around or be of service to people who didn't fit their narrative. For example, being unvaccinated.
mm,
They wouldn't see those people. That's divisive. That's not true. It's not life giving. It's bad. And that's how thick that fear is, that indoctrination, that worldview, because the very essence of a doctor is a healer. That's why it's called curandero. Healing comes from wholeness, it comes from integrity. That's why a doctor has to be in such high integrity. And to be whole, we're not divisive. We have to accept everyone. If someone comes to us in need, then we help them. Doesn't matter if they're Pablo Escobar or Mother Teresa or a homeless person or a rich person. If someone is in pain and they're asking for help, you as a doctor, your responsibility is to help them. That's that creative energy. It's
mm,
life giving. All of those people have that creative force. The most evil person that we may think in the world is still a child of God.
mm,
And, but that's how easy it is to get lost in that dizziness. Um, and the very good healers that I know, they help anyone. And so do in the same way they teach anyone. They teach someone who wants to learn, who has that desire to operate from the heart. Are they looking at their skin color? I don't know, maybe. They might be, like we all do. But in a deep sense, the good ones see, because they're not operating through a divisive quality, where's this person's heart? And ultimately, it doesn't matter what their culture is, what their color of their skin is. Do they have a good heart? Are they serving that life-giving energy? Because that's truth. And anything outside of that is divisive.
mm.
It's untrue.